Hello everyone, welcome to Cinema Savvy and welcome back to a brand new movie review. It is me, Chris, joined today with Tate, sort of the resident animation film review guys on the channel, here to talk about exactly that, a brand new animated film. This is Raya and the Last Dragon. This is the 59th Disney animated classic. This has recently hit Disney Plus. I think it's premiere access at the moment. I think it is released overseas in the US in some select cinemas at the moment. But yeah, we're here today to talk about it. Now, I don't know how much of this is going to be a spoiler review. I think we're pretty much going to keep it relatively spoiler free, but if we do have to talk about any spoilers, we'll get right into it. I guess we can talk about the plot for this thing before, in case anyone doesn't know what the Last Dragon is about.
Before we go into that, socials, very quickly before we go into that.
Yes.
As always, guys, please follow us on the various different social media channels. So go follow us on Facebook, that is Cinema Savvy. Go follow us on Twitter, that is cinema_savvy. We're back on Letterboxd, that is letterboxd.com/cinema savvy. And go into the description, pick up a t-shirt from TeePublic. I am wearing mine today, but it is underneath this because it is actually quite cold in the house. And of course, if you have any thoughts on Raya and the Last Dragon, then please put them down below. Share the video, everything like that. We want to get a discussion going about this. We'll try and keep it spoiler free for as long as possible.
We're going to go into the plot for this thing anyway, just sort of like the rough plot. This is according to IMDb. In a realm known as Kumandra, a reimagined Earth inhabited by an ancient civilization, a warrior named Raya is determined to find the Last Dragon. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory from the trailer, really, isn't it? It's kind of a title that says it all, really. So I'm going to try and cast my mind to when this film was announced, because I feel like this film was relatively late in the game announced. I want to say like maybe a year or a year and a bit ago. I remember that they released a bunch of concept art for it. I distinctly remember that. I think it was at a D23 convention or something like that. And I mean, I love mythology, I love fantasy, and I think they released the initial concept art was you can't see him because I'm covering his giant bulk, but the armadillo thing, the giant armadillo beetle thing, and Raya herself. And immediately I was, this is, culturally like where it's set, sort of like Southeast Asia. I love that setting. I think that's great. Just from the visuals from that concept art, I thought this could shape up to be a really interesting Disney film, one that we haven't really seen before, a culture that hasn't really been explored in the Disney films before this point. And so I kind of had, I won't say mad hype for this film, but I was very much interested in the concept. And then I kind of panicked when we got trailer 2. I think trailer 1 was almost like a proof of concept. It almost showed Raya as like a sort of Tomb Raider kind of like character, very capable warrior. And just to sort of get a sense of the visuals and the music and the culture. And then the second trailer came out and we heard characters talk and sort of like get an insight into the humor, and we'll talk about that later. And I got very worried by that second trailer. I don't know if you were in a similar position by seeing the trailers.
I mean, I didn't actually see any of the concept art or anything like that going into it. The first thing that I saw from this was the first trailer. It was the first time I kind of twigged onto it, which is very unusual for a Disney film to have very little advertising. I'm not sure if they were targeting their advertising in Southeast Asia or across the Asian market, and that's what they were going for with this film or not. But even in the very, very close run-up to this film, I've seen no advertising for this at all. Yeah. I've seen people commenting about the lack of advertising online as well. And it did make me wonder kind of in the run-up. I think it was after the second trailer where I was starting to think they've had very little advertising for this film at all. Is it actually going to be a good film? Because usually films which are good, they will hype everything about it. They will put like posters up everywhere. They will be advertising online. They'll be advertising on YouTube, anywhere they can. I've seen this only come up in my subscription feed when the trailers came out, and that was it. And there's been very little kind of on the homepage until the actual day that it released, that it said, oh yeah, we're streaming this new film now as well. But like on the Disney Plus homepage, I mean, WandaVision took center stage on the day that this was released, which is kind of, a bit interesting as well with that their own strategy with that. But I was concerned with the second trailer. I was very concerned with the second trailer, hearing some of the characters talk and seeing kind of that direction that they would go with the humor. And I was hoping that maybe that would only be a small part of the film. This isn't really a big spoiler. Sadly, it is quite a distracting part of the film. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of things that you can say are very good about this film, which we'll go into. My overall kind of thoughts on it, just before we kind of delve a little bit deeper into it, is that this is a film which had a lot of promise, and I don't think it delivered on all of it. but you can take little bits of the concept of it and you can probably make a nice film out of it.
I think this film is a question of tone. I think it needed to rein back some of the. I'm not even saying that do away with all the humor, because it's a Disney film. Ultimately, you do need humor in there in some respect, and we need to be mindful of that. That ultimately, this is a film geared towards children, so there's got to be some humor in there. But comparing it to sort of like other Asian animated films that you've got, sort of, or like Western animated films set in Asia. You've got like Mulan, for example, which I think does a much better job of balancing its humor and the actual emotions and drama of the story. Different studio completely, but Leica, which we always keep coming back to every single time, Cuba and the Two Strings, does a great job of kind of showcasing that culture and that history. And does have humor in there, but it's mostly in keeping with the tone and the feel. It's not too distracting. And I think this film got to the point where it was distracting for me. I love the concept. I love the visuals of this. And I mean, of course, it's Disney animation, so the animation looks absolutely second to none. The environments are rich and detailed and beautiful and very varied, actually. That's one of the things that I liked about this, was that you don't just get it set in one kind of locale. You have like a scorching desert, you have frozen tundra, you have sort of like a tropical rainforesty kind of place. So, and then you have like a bustling waterside town, like a town built on the water. So I loved all the locations, and I loved seeing all those different things there. The animation's absolutely incredible. I don't think it's sort of animation that sort of takes it in a different direction, though. It's not like, when we go and see Into the Spider-Verse and we go, that has pushed forward animation. We've never seen anything like that. This is just kind of your run-of-the-mill Disney CGI animated Disney film. You know what I mean?
I would say it felt a little bit different to that, because from the very kind of first opening scenes and everything like that, the animation looks more polished than before. And I don't know whether I enjoyed that. I mean, I'm a big fan of the classic Disney films, and I do like what they've done in kind of this, I'd say the second or even third renaissance that they've had with these kind of films coming out like Frozen, Moana, this kind of generation of Disney films. I like what they've done, the animation style with it. But there's always that little bit of roughness still left in there. Something's out of proportion, something feels different in those films. Mm-hmm. And in this film, you do have the dragon, you do have the kind of giant armadillo bug type thing. But I feel like the human characters are almost airbrushed in the way that they've been animated. And it did feel, there was some points where I did feel that's a little bit too realistic. And I know that Disney and animation studios want to push the boundaries of how far they can take animation in various different senses. I mean, Lion King last few years ago was a massive testament to how far that animation can be pushed as far as making things look realistic. This still felt like a cartoon, but it did lean towards that realistic side. And I think it lost something in the fact that it didn't have an element of roughness to it. It didn't have that grit that a film of this style should do. This is an action film. I want to point that out here. It's a family action film. It should have some tiny bit of roughness to go with it, instead of all the characters almost looking airbrushed in every single scene.
I don't think it's even in terms of like grit or anything like that. I think it's just if you take Tangled, for example, how, pardon the pun, like animated and emotive you can get with animation. This felt very more, it was trying to go for more like of a realism in terms of how the characters moved, how they interacted with each other, which is fine if that was their intention.
I didn't mean like grit in terms of like more violence or anything that I didn't. I just feel like there needs to be some element of roughness into the animation of the characters.
It can be too, it can be too polished. It can be a bit too clean. I didn't really sort of zone onto that all that much, to be honest, because it really did remind me of Moana in a lot of respects, especially in terms of its story. Now, granted, there isn't a dragon in Moana in that respect, but similar kind of heroine, main character, even down to how the film opens. This isn't sort of giving anything away. This is literally within like the first 10 seconds of the film. There's this sort of 2D in the beginning, this is what happened, and we get all this exposition done in pretty much exactly the same animation style as the beginning of Moana, where it talks about, in that film, Te and how Maui stole the heart of Te, and then an evil plague swept across the land. And it's kind of a similar premise in this film about a plague that swept across the land and a heart that has to be restored in some way in order to bring peace to the land. So my overall opinions on this film, it feels like it's probably one of the most by-the-numbers Disney films I've seen in a long time. This isn't a bad film. I'm not going to say this film was awful. I just don't think that this film is memorable in like the grand scope of Disney. Now,
And
say what you want about Frozen. Frozen has captured the hearts of millions. Like everyone remembers Frozen. And by proxy, like Frozen 2, because it's a continuation of those characters. Tangled, people still talk about that. Wreck-It Ralph, I mean, that even got a sequel. There's more recent Disney films that I feel have stayed with people and will stay with people. And maybe this is down to like the poor marketing, but this feels like a film that people are just going to watch once and then move on with their lives, and we wait for the next thing to come out. And it's such a shame because all of the ingredients are there. There is great things in this film, but there was a lack of cohesion with something. And maybe throughout this conversation that we have, I'm going to pass over to you again in a second. Maybe it will sort of click for me what was missing in this film, but it felt like there was a crucial magic or ingredient in there. It's all the by the numbers of Disney, but it's missing something, and I can't quite put my finger on it as of just yet.
Well, one of the things I was going to kind of pick up on what you just said was you described Moana and the Heart of Tayte and stuff like that. That's memorable. That's something from the film that was memorable. You could immediately remember those kind of things. You can remember the lore of it. You can remember the characters. Sure, I've seen Moana a few times now, but even after the first watching, I was taken into that world. I felt like I was a part of that world from the off, and I kind of bought into the story that was being shown to me. With this film, I mean, we were talking about this beforehand. We couldn't even, I had to look up, and you had to kind of also remember the name of the place that this was meant to be set in. Like,
I keep wanting to go and say Zamunda because I've recently watched the Coming to America films, but it's Kumandra.
Kumandra. I was about to say Karma Chameleon then for a second. But no, this film has so many forgettable things. I mean, the characters, I can remember Raya. Character names other than that, no, I can't.
You got Sisu. You've got the dragon.
Sisu, the dragon. There you go. Those are the two characters that anyone will be able to remember. We were actually discussing this as well once we kind of watched the film. You mentioned that one of the things that were missing from this film possibly would have been music. We were trying to figure out whether this was the first Disney film with a princess in. Not made by Pixar, obviously, but even Brave had a song. To not have a song within the film itself. Did we confirm whether that was true or not?
I didn't confirm whether it was true. I did. Well, I basically did. I glanced at all my Disney films on my shelf, and I think that it is the first one, at least Disney princess-led film, certainly. Because, I mean, I was looking at Atlantis, The Lost Empire, which has Kida in there, who is technically a princess in that film, but I don't think she's counted in the main lineup. I think the lack of music, in terms of songs, in terms of like actual singy songs in this film, did hurt the film.
I don't think it does. I think this film wouldn't work if there was songs. It's not the tone that they're going for. There are comedic moments. There are moments of great action and stuff like that. And I know that you can have films like that, like Mulan. I feel like Mulan is the best example of this, where you have those amazing action sequences. You have the comedy, but you do also have the music, which ties it all in together. Like with this film, it's very difficult to have that typical Disney I want song when what the main character wants isn't separated from every other character in the film. The entire plot of this film revolves around pretty much everyone wanting the same thing, which is this kind of control over the last dragon and to be able to kind of free the land from this curse. And it's very difficult to have the main character basically just be one perspective on what everyone else wants. I think that might be what's missing from this film. You don't emphasize with the character fully because every single person in the story wants exactly the same thing, and we're just following along her story from this. And that, without being able to differentiate between the different character motivations throughout the entire story, it's very difficult to get fully behind the main character, and therefore it loses something in not trust, but you don't fully commit to this one character because we're seeing other people's stories who all want the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the film kind of functions almost like a road movie where we are constantly moving from location to location. In each location, we're picking up a new member of the party. who's going to join on the quest. But none of the side characters really were interesting. I didn't think they were particularly well written, and they're just kind of background noise after a while, because you either, we've got to move on to the next place and pick up the next person. We never really get those moments where you just sit down and you take in the characters. They all become kind of one note and are there just to be part of this group of the people, essentially. I feel
like sorry, just on that, the side characters I feel like were almost shoehorned into the story to fit the narrative that they wanted at the end.
Yeah,
and that's really bad that you would kind of throw those characters in just so that you can have the end result and the end goal. This isn't a spoiler here by saying that every single Disney film has a kind of a moral lesson at the end of it, which is always aimed towards kids. In every single Disney film, it has that. For Mulan, it's, girls can be badass too, you can be whatever you want to be, and that kind of narrative and everything like that. You shouldn't be afraid to hide who you are. Very simple, very effective. In this film, it's all about trust and teamwork. And what I don't like is normal Disney films don't throw the message in your face.
This one did.
They don't. They kind of let you understand the message. You watch the film and you go, oh, this is the lesson that I can take from that. This film actually, without spoiling, says a line which basically is like, we need to trust each other. This is what will make us win the day, or along those lines. And it's in kind of the climax, and it's so out of place, and it feels like they threw that in because they didn't know who they were targeting here. I mean, one of the side characters is a baby. I don't know if this film was targeted at babies or not, because they were throwing this lesson in our face so hard. It was so out of place. I can't even describe it. But I feel like the thing that this film just maybe didn't have was just cohesive writing or something like that. For the characters, for the actual dialogue in the film, some of it was very bad. We were talking about this beforehand as well. The amount of modern day references thrown in this film is so distracting.
That's a big one for me, actually. And I think that when you have this mythic, legendary world, there seems to be like a certain level of authenticity that you lose by throwing in a lot of modern day references. Now, I was watching this film and I was thinking back to, I could say, a similar character, the genie in Aladdin. So from it, you've got this sort of legendary, like Arabian world. Everything kind of plays by its own rules, and then the genie comes into it and he's doing Jack Nicholson impressions, he's doing Rodney Dangerfield impressions, and he's doing a lot of pop culture things. Now, obviously, that was Robin Williams' humor and that was his improv that he was able to inject into it, but that works for me in that film as this genie, this larger-than-life character, this crazy force of nature that shows up. Now, you have the dragon in this, and obviously not to the same level as the genie, but I was getting very similar vibes from Awkwafina's performance of the character. There are a lot of sort of modern day verbiage and ways of saying things. There's a scene where the dragon says like, oh, this beetle's got a fine booty or something. And every time you had moments like that, it took me right out of the film. I actually love the first act of this film when we get a sense of this culture and we get to see Raya's family, her father, and all these different tribes converging together as like a sort of like peace treaty as ambassadors from their kingdoms. That was my favorite part of the film. And then we have a 6-year time jump and Raya feels like a completely different character, and we haven't seen that growth. We haven't seen that continuation from that pivotal moment to the point where we're reunited with her. And then it's pretty much just a by-the-numbers road movie after that. So I think it was the clash of tone. It just didn't work for me. And that's purely down to the writing. I think you've inherently got a good story in there. And I think you've got a good world and a good sandbox to tell that story. But it's just the writing. It's just the characters weren't particularly memorable or interesting to me. And as you mentioned, the message, it is another one where they save the day through the power of love and friendship and teamwork and hard work.
The worst thing about that is normally it's like, oh, they kind of allude to it being that way and they show it on screen, but they don't actually say the words. But they don't say the words of the lesson. They don't say, if we only worked as a team and trusted each other, maybe we would destroy the evil thing. And it's
you could have done that with no dialogue at all. You could have done that through glances. They could have that hold it together, nothing's working, and they just exchange glances and we know what's going on. They could have done something like that.
To summarize, basically, this film, the main kind of negative criticism of this film is that it lacks any subtlety and lacks any nuance at all, basically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, like another sort of mythic, sort of not an environmental film. This isn't sort of like trying to hammer home like an environmental message at all. But in terms of this spiritual sort of fantasy kingdom with warriors and everything, I was thinking of Princess Mononoke. I was very much thinking of that, and I was thinking in that film, would you get a line where the wolf in it says something about a fine booty, and it's
No.
you wouldn't get that in a film such as that, and I think that this needed to have that similar kind of restraint with its humor or its direction. I guess it is also down to the direction, because I think that the voice performances in this film are fine. I think Awkwafina, absolutely fine, but I think it's the more dramatic moments with Awkwafina are the ones that I appreciated the most, when she's not being this wacky, kooky character, and there is that restraint. And I think that this film lacked the restraint in terms of its humor, and it just didn't mesh for me. I'm just going to go back to the song thing really quickly.
Yeah, sure.
I actually think that songs would have benefited this film for me personally, and I don't know if that was sort of like a subconscious thing where my brain was going, this is a Disney princess film and there's no songs in it and I'm not getting that level of connection. But a good Disney song can advance the mental state and the character themselves, and also serve as a way to tell the story, but through music. And that's what a good musical number could do. You can inject humor in there as well. A song doesn't have to always further the story. It can just be like a comedic sort of interlude. But I felt like that would have kept up the energy, because this film felt very much exposition, plot, and light on character. I guess we can talk about the villain.
I was just about to say, can we really talk about the villain? Because there isn't really much of a main villain. We have a few kind of people who you consider to be smaller villains, but at the same time, they've gone for that vibe of they're villains, but also they're empathetic like characters. You can kind of get on their side. You can understand their reasoning behind it. The actual main villain from this film is a purple blob. So it's with no voice, nothing. So it's very difficult to kind of comment or critique on it. In fact, I would probably, if we're talking about worst Disney villains, the purple blob that turns people into stones is probably down there with the worst kind of Disney villains put to screen. It wouldn't have made too much of a change to have given the purple blob a menacing voice or something to go along with it. Something for the main character to go against, other than unstoppable purple blob.
Well, I think that the purple blobs are the threat. I think that's the immediate threat in the film, but I think that the villainous role kind of goes to Namari's character, voiced by Gemma Chan, who's, I'm not going to go into it because of spoilers, but there is that connection. There is like a friendliness that possibly turns into betrayal throughout. And they are very similar characters. They ultimately want the same thing, Raya and Namari, but go about it and want to go about it in completely different ways. And I actually quite liked Namari's character, but I would have liked more scenes with her to develop her slightly more. She kind of shows up when she needs to, but I think that given more screen time and more of those scenes of real connection between her and Raya, I was thinking of Prince of Egypt with like Moses and Ramesses, where Ramesses is the villain of that film, but in a way there is empathy there. You can sort of understand why he's doing what he's doing. There is a, in that film, he doesn't want to be the weak link. He's got to try and prove to himself that he is that leader that his father never saw him as. So I think that you could have done something similar in this, where there are moments where Namar is with her mother and she says like, oh, I've trained you to be this leader. But they're very few and far between scenes. Like, she doesn't quite fit the bill as a villain. She's more sort of rides the line a little bit. There's like a little bit of moral gray there. I don't know. The Disney films now, it seems like the Disney villain is a lost art now in Disney films, I find. Can you remember the last truly outright evil Disney villain in a film? I think it's probably Mother Grottle in Tangled.
Would you say Hans?
Yeah, but like I'm talking of like Maleficent standard, of Ursula standard.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, okay, there we go. Tangled,
yeah.
I'd say that was the last one. I mean, I like the villain in Moana, the fact that it was kind of Te herself and stuff like that. But like with this film, would this film have worked better if they didn't call it Raya and the Last Dragon and just called it The Last Dragon or The Heart of the Dragon and had the story completely split down the middle? half of it being Raya, half of it being character's name who I cannot remember. Namari.
I don't know. I think that it would have been good to just sort of like cut between the two characters, maybe, because it is from Raya's perspective, and we only kind of get Namari when Raya crosses paths with her. I don't know. I felt like I would have just liked more from a character, because I really did like that interplay and that kind of duality that was going on there, where Namari is kind of the more aggressive one that believes, through violence to achieve what she needs to, that will ultimately bring about peace. Whereas, ultimately it's completely the opposite for Raya. So I liked the duality there. I would have just liked more of that, I think, because Namari kind of falls into the wayside along with all of the other supporting characters, the whole host of supporting characters that we got in this film that just
I hate the baby. I'm sorry, but I hate the baby.
You really hate the baby. I don't mind the baby.
Here's the thing. I don't like characters which are dumb for the point of being dumb. And the baby character is only thrown in there just for laughs. Yeah. There is no reason why the baby character is outside of that. And it isn't even a character that has any lines other than goo goo gaga or whatever the baby kind of noise makes. It's completely useless. You could have done exactly the same thing with just the monkeys.
Yeah.
And not have the baby thrown in, because that's just a cute thing that kids can kind of go, ha, 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 baby cute, but also baby dumb. And I don't like that. I don't like what Disney do when they do those characters.
And the most irresponsible parent as well at the end.
Oh, Christ.
Like the baby's reunited with the mom, and the mom's like, "Where have you been?"
Hold on, I've got a bit of my last kind of point that I've got about this film. I do want to point out I did kind of enjoy this film, but in a very mediocre way. It's not the worst film ever. We are slating it, but at the same time, it does have some good merit points and everything like that. One of the side characters, who was the boy on the boat, is it Boone?
Boone, yeah.
Boone. So Boone's quite a young character. He's on his own. His family had been frozen. I have to ask the question. There's a 6-year time jump. How old is this kid? How long has he been surviving on his own? How has he been able to do that? Because he looks about 6-7 years old, and he acts like he's 6 or 7 years old. Was he
According to this is on Wikipedia, he's a 10-year-old entrepreneur. So he would have been 4. He would have been 4 when his family. Yeah,
living on his own since he was 4.
A baby can live with monkeys and be absolutely fine. So who knows? Final points I can say. I love the score of this film. James Newton Howard. There's a moment at the end. I'm not going to give it away, but it was probably the only moment in the film where I love animation where there are scenes where it just lets you just take in the wonder of the animation that you're seeing on screen. It looks absolutely gorgeous, and the music kicks in, and you're like, this is what animation's all about. And I did get moments like that towards the very end of this film. They do some really nice stuff, and it is visually dazzling, and James Newton Howard's score is beautiful to this film. I absolutely loved it, and I sat through all the credits as well. I always do anyway, but it was really nice just to listen to the soundtrack in isolation as well. My final points on this film. I don't think this is a bad film. I don't think this is an awful film. I won't tell you to avoid watching this film. It's a perfectly serviceable film. It's a very, as Disney films go, it's fundamentally very average. I don't know if I'll ever rush back to watch this film. There are still Disney films now, and I guess nostalgia plays into it for me, but even recent ones, Moana, I could throw that on any day of the week, and that's a relatively modern one. Taken out of films such as like Beauty and the Beast or Aladdin or Lion King, the films that I grew up with that I could watch at any point. There are better modern Disney films. It's a shame because I think the setting, the actual visuals, the style of this, the world that it's set in, I think all the ingredients are there for a great Disney film. Something just doesn't come together. I think it's down to the writing. I think it feels too contemporary, which clashes with the ancient mythical world that it's meant to be set in. The voice work is absolutely fine for the direction that they're given. The animation is absolutely second to none, in my opinion. Very crisp, very clear, very detailed, very sprawling, and loads of different environments to feast your eyes on. But there's just a disconnect there. It lacks and I think the message of the film itself, whilst it's about as subtle as a sledgehammer to the face, I think it is still a good message for kids. I think it is like a very appropriate message for films. I don't know how much of it is drawn on sort of current political standards and how where we all feel like we're divided and we need to come together more and we're becoming xenophobic of each other. And I don't know, I don't want to read too much in that, but how Zootopia kind of played on that inherent xenophobia with people, which was rife at the time that that film came out, it feels like this might be chasing the same thing. It's a fine film. It's very average. The story isn't particularly enthralling. The characters that inhabit the world aren't particularly all that interesting. I feel like maybe with some added music, with a more tightly written script and more scenes where the characters can actually have emotion, like have emotive moments, and it's not just exposition to get the story constantly moving, and we can just sort of ease into this world a little bit more. I think this could have been a truly special film for Disney, but as it is, it's a real shame because I was looking forward to this one.
I think potential is kind of the word that probably should be thrown around the most of this film. I'm actually going the opposite direction. I'm not going to recommend this film yet, at least. And the reason why is because Disney are charging 30 quid for you to watch it at home.
Pounds, I think it's 20 pounds in the UK. Yeah,
it's 27 or 28 euros out here to watch it, which is ridiculous. I don't care about the exchange rate. That is too much. And I know that Disney are thinking, oh, well, a family going to the cinema paying that ticket, but that's with the cinema experience. I know this is a completely different argument coming, but this film is mediocre. This film is very bang average. And you'd expect to be paying that amount of money for your family to see a film. You'd expect something of, I'd say, higher quality as far as the writing is concerned. You can maybe get away with saying, oh, well, the animation is beautiful and stuff like that. But inherently, this film is going to be a one-time watch for people, and they're not going to watch it again. I doubt people are going to say it's their favorite Disney film. I doubt people are going to really go back to it too often. There's always going to be that hardcore set of fans which really get into the lore and enjoy it. But I don't see this as a film that is appealing massively to the masses. And I think until this maybe comes out on DVD, or until this film becomes accessible on streaming services for a cheaper price, or like they did with Mulan, they just kind of release it for people to watch after a certain amount of time, I wouldn't recommend this film at all until that point.
I think for the price, if you've got a large family, it's something that's going to keep the kids quiet for about 2 hours. I think there's enough there for kids to latch onto and be entertained by. You've got Tuk Tuk, who's the cute armadillo thing, and he is really cute. Disney can, absolutely nail cute animals. Yeah, but in terms of, whether, we're coming at it from like being adults now, right? And what we want from films, but maybe we're not the right audience. But then again, we like animation, and animation can do wonderful
Here's the thing. Disney always makes films that are targeted at not only the kids, but also the adults who are watching it. It's a family film. It's not
that scene from Frozen 2, right? The one, what was it? Not One Day More. That's from Les Mis. What was the Next Right Thing? Or I think it's called.
Yes.
Jesus Christ! I completely agree with that.
But the problem is, this film wasn't made for the adults watching along. There are some things that they can latch onto, like the action in this film. We didn't really talk about it, but the action was actually quite well. It was well animated. It was quite good.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the fight scenes were very entertaining. But that is completely in contrast to all of the modern day references, the childish humor, the unbelievably childish humor, and the kind of terrible writing and side characters. There wasn't really much else that could have saved that film. And I mean, I don't think they could honestly say to people that it is worth that amount of money, even for a family to pay for. If it was cheaper than what it was advertised as, or if they advertised it more, then possibly, yeah. But in its certain case, you're on Disney Plus, they're advertising WandaVision over this film. Watch WandaVision.
Absolutely. So the next Disney animated classic that is going to be released, which will be the 60th, we've hit a new round number for Disney animated classics, is going to be released later this year, actually, November 24th in the United States. That's going to be Encanto. That's with music by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Maybe they realized that we need the guy who did the music to Moana to come back, and hopefully we'll have more positive things to say on that one, because, I'm going to stick with Disney. I still love Disney. I will till my dying day, but yeah, it's a sad sort of not commiserations, but slightly underwhelmed by today's film. But anyway, we want to pass over to you guys now, and we want to hear from you. Have you seen Raya and the Last Dragon? Please do comment with your thoughts. Did you really enjoy the film? Maybe you hated the film more than we did. Maybe you can be more critical than what we were, or maybe you're just exactly the same as us, completely smack bang in the middle. Please do like, comment, share, subscribe, and also follow us on our social medias. You can follow us on Facebook at Cinema Savvy, Twitter at cinema_savvy. We've got letterboxd at .com/cinemasavvy, and we also have the link to the TeePublic in the description down below. You can pick up some of our merch. We've got some t-shirt designs on there. We have a lot of content coming out. Sticking with Disney, we will be doing our reviews on Falcon and the Winter Soldier in a couple of weeks' time. It's going to be on the 19th of March, 8 p.m. GMT for all of these as well. We've currently got the Infinity War retrospective going on as we speak. This weekend, we just had Iron Man 2 go up, so expect new Marvel MCU film reviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. We have the Cinema Savvy Awards, which is every Thursday at 8 p.m., and we have retro reviews as well this Tuesday. So this will be our next video on the channel. 9th of March, we are looking at 90s action films, going through a little bit of a 90s phase, and we will be talking about Face Off. I've never seen that film. Very much looking forward to that one. And a very different film from Raya and the Last Dragon, I'm sure. So this has been great to talk about this film today. It's always good to talk about another Disney film, whether it's good or bad. Thank you to everyone that's watched today, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Take care, everyone.